Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is part 4 of our 5-part series covering knives. Today we'll be discussing knife material. That includes blades as well as handle materials. So today we're going to start off with the blade materials. We're going to go at the low end of things. And what we're looking for is sharpness, edge retention, corrosion resistance, hardness, as well as a little bit of price. So we're going to start off with the low end of things with 420 or AUS6 steel, as well as 440A steel. So these steels are pretty soft, so the edge retention isn't going to be the best. You can get it pretty sharp though. Price-wise, obviously that's going to reflect its performance. These are the kind of knives that you find at Walmart, etc. Moving on, we're going to 440C AUS8 /8CR 13 MOV. So we have the 440A, I believe, right there, as well as the 8CR 13 MOV. Both are pretty good mid-range steels. You're going to be paying maybe, what, 30 to 60 bucks for an 8CR 13 MOV or AUS8. And they're going to perform pretty well. As far as corrosion resistance, they're not going to be as good as these steels over here. But again, they are going to be a little bit harder, better edge retention. And price-wise, for the 440C, we're looking at about the same. 440C is a little bit higher in, what is it, carbon? So it makes it a little bit harder. Yeah, a little bit harder steel. So because of that, edge retention is going to be better. You're also going to be able to put it under a little more strain and not worry about rolled edges, etc.
Alright, so next time we're going to go to the high-end steels. These are going to be your better quality knives. They're going from anywhere from $75 to $150 price range. These are going to include your N680 S30V D2 154cm. These are going to have really great edge retention as long as working hardness, and corrosion will be pretty good as well. They're not going to be like, they're going to be a little bit better than your other like AUS8s and things like that because they're not in a production model. They're a little bit higher quality production models, which are really, really good. Most of your knives that you're going to find at like Benchmade's and things like that, really top quality dealerships are going to be using these kinds of steels. Next up, you have your premium steels. These are going to be the knives that are going to be almost in really nice production or maybe custom production. This is going to be called like your S90V steels, your LMAX, and your M390. These are going to be great as far as corrosion resistance, working hardness, edge retention, and like everything. Like these are the ones that are the top dogs, but you are going to pay the price for it. These can go anywhere from $250 to $300 or above, depending on whether or not you get a custom knife or not. But with that price tag, you are getting premium steels, and they are going to last a lot longer.
And then before we segue into handle materials, let's talk a little bit about what steel would probably be best for you. I typically like the 154 D2 style steels because you don't pay that much for them, but you do get a lot of performance out of it compared to like a $60 knife. And you're not really going to notice that much unless you put it under a lot of abuse between a $150 knife, like a $300, $400 knife.
Well, I'm going off on what Quentin said. If you can't meet that price point, there's no shame in that. Your AUS8s, your 8CR 14 MOVs, 440C, they're all going to be really good. They're going to be as good of a price, or as much of a price, but you're not going to feel as bad whenever you break it or anything like that. You lose your sharpness. You can just go to the wall or go up to any kind of dealership. They'd be like, oh, here's another $50 still later. You get a pretty decent knife that's just like your old one.
That's a good point. So you have the decision. You can buy a knife that you probably don't have to worry about too much, but if you do break, it's not going to be good. Yeah.
Good costume.
As opposed to something like, you know, $30, $60. If you break it, no big deal. Just go out and get another one.
Yeah. But let's go one more thing real quick too. If you do want to spend the money and get the higher end quality knives, it's also another great option just because you are going to get that better quality materials, and they will last a really long time. They are also going to be really great for formal events that are kind of showing off your buddies, like, hey, look, this is an awesome knife I just got, and they will last because they are designed to last.
Yeah, telling you from experience there, especially the ZT here in LMAX steel, I think I only had to sharpen it once out of months of hard use.
Yeah, you're going to get what you pay for.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and transition to handle materials. So next up we continue our handle materials. So we basically organize this as far as processing. Some things are processed very little, if at all. Others are pretty much man-made. So starting off the natural bits, we have leather, wood, as well as bone. We failed to find an example of bone, but there are those out there. Leather typically feels good in people's hands as opposed to other materials. It's more inert, so it doesn't get cold easily, doesn't get hot easily, so it feels good in the hand in pretty much any kind of temperature. The only downside really to leather is the fact that it does swell up with moisture. Same can be said with wood. Wood does feel more comfortable in other people's hands, though it might not be as grippy as leather, and it does swell up sometimes. What's your experience with leather or wood?
I like wood a little bit better than I like wood, just because it gives it a little bit more of a softer feel. Depending on what kind of wood you have, there are a bunch of different types of wood that you can actually use for carving knives, but typically I like a little bit of leather a little bit better.
Makes sense. Alright, then we go to a little bit of both. So these are materials that actually aren't as processed as purely man-made, but they're still pretty natural. Obviously, we have aluminum and steel up here. Aluminum being completely, basically a chassis for the knife, for the handle. Aluminum is an element, so we consider a little bit of both. Aluminum tends to be a little less grippy than something like leather or wood, but it is a little bit more durable. Then you also have your micarta, which is pretty much just layers of linen with resin inside of it. Makes it a little bit harder and a little bit grippier too. And then obviously you have a steel there. I would say the biggest downsides to an aluminum or steel handle is the fact that they're not as inert, or basically they're affected more by the atmosphere around them. So especially with steel handles, they can get a little bit rusty in moisture, and then also they can heat up or cool very quickly, again, depending on the temperature.
Yeah. Now, real quick before we head on, as far as the grippiness in aluminum or metal, there's a good good upside to that. You can actually make it as aggressive as you want it or as smooth as you want it. That's a really good point I kind of want to hit on, just because you like a smoother or grippier feel, you can actually get it milled out or however you'd like it to be able to feel in your hand, which is also a really great thing. Just to kind of hit on, you may get that, like Quinn was saying, you get a little bit more adapted to the weather that way, but you actually get a better feeling knife sometimes.
Yeah, and skate tape especially. Skate tape is great because if you're a person like me and you want as much traction as you can get on your blade, basically put skate tape on your knife and turn it into, something that's going to lock into your hand no matter what.
Yeah, for the ones that aren't familiar with skate tape, it's basically just like textured tape. It's usually found like on stairwells, things like that, just so that way people aren't like slipping and falling. It just basically like a gritty sandpaper feel, just taped on there.
Think skateboards.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Cool. And then completely man-made materials. So we have the G10 here. G10, I personally like pretty much almost all my knives in G10 because it's very durable, feels good in the hand too. It's inert like these guys, so it's not that affected by the atmosphere around them. And also you get a lot of traction with it.
Yeah. Like I said, G10 can actually get milled out to however you'd like it. If you want a more aggressive or a polished G10, it kind of gives you that option to be able to get a feel for whatever you want in your hand, which is also really great. That's another reason why I like G10 as well.
There are a lot of knives out there too that you can actually get custom-made handle scales for that.
That's correct.
Alright, and then we also have the carbon fiber handles. This is a Boker, right?
Yeah, it's Boker.
Yeah, this Boker knife is actually all carbon fiber. But as you can see, the carbon fiber handle is very similar to the G10. It's pretty grippy. It also looks really cool. There are a lot of handles out there that actually just have a spray painted carbon fiber finish. But the real carbon fiber is really grippy, very durable as well, and just as inert, like I said, with the leather and wood. Not very much affected by the temperature.
Right. One thing too on the carbon fiber, we talked a lot about where we can mill out. You cannot actually mill out the carbon fiber as much. Now you can put like jimping in it, which is basically where you cut down the spine in little tight little places, so that we actually get a little bit better feel and grip. But that can only really happen on the spine. It's not really much you can do as far as the actual surface area where your hand is, just because the carbon fiber isn't really well adjusted to be able to get those nice little cutouts into it.
It's harder material, would you say?
I wouldn't say it's harder, it's just it won't feel as good, just because the way the carbon fiber lays, they actually kind of weave it in, and you could get that, what I'm trying to say, kind of not as, it doesn't feel as good just because you could get that weave kind of out of shape.
Makes sense. And then we'll move on to rubber. Pretty self-explanatory. Think tires. People like rubber sometimes because it is a little less susceptible to moisture, temperature stuff. Like I said, with the wood and leather, they can actually swell with moisture. Rubber, that's not the case. It actually locks in your hand well as well. Feels good. And you can get the really high-speed handles like that have, I believe, Ontario. Ontario makes their Spec Plus series with Kraton handles, which pretty much, really, really cool rubber. But yeah, pretty self-explanatory there. A little bit cheaper too.
Right. Back to the whole weather thing. Eventually, rubber can eventually dry rot. Now, this will take a lot of times for it to actually do that if it's not exposed to moisture enough. Everyday carry, you should be fine. But as far as if it's ever exposed to elements continuously, like it's left outside forever, could eventually dry rot. It does provide the good traction because you can actually, it's like almost like stippling. You can actually stipple it into however you want. Similar to this Kershaw Blur, they actually stippled it enough to where you can actually get a really decent grip, and it's kind of raised in some places, so you actually get a better grip. And comparative to this Benchmade here, where it's just kind of dipped in and kind of shaped out. It's a little bit smoother, but you still kind of give that grippy kind of texture to it, which is kind of awesome.
And that actually segues really well into basically our combo handles, so to speak. So I believe that's a Blur. Kershaw Blur. It actually has an aluminum handle like this Infidel here, but it does have the rubber inlays that give you a little more traction.
And that can also be said with skate tape as well. There are a bunch of knives that actually do a skate tape inlay. Carbon fiber inlays, things like that, if you want to make them look a little bit better or give you that more of a grippier feel, which is awesome as well.
And then you have your Zytel or your fiberglass reinforced nylon, or basically your plastic.
Yeah, it's a thermal plastic.
Pretty much a plastic. You find this a lot in the lower end Benchmades, not saying they're bad quality, but they are a little bit cheaper to manufacture just because it's injected molded plastic basically.
Yeah, they are lighter too. Usually your plastics are going to be a little bit lighter comparatively to your G10 and your aluminums and things like that, just because it's just a lightweight plastic.
Yeah, which is a good advantage, especially if you're packing a lot of gear. Let's say you're a soldier or a hiker or camper, whatever. Zytel or FRN, whatever you want to call it, is going to be pretty durable, and it's also going to be very lightweight and affordable.
Lastly, we have a kind of like a rope, basically wrapped around. You can actually do that. That way, you can actually get a really minimalistic handle. And it actually can give you a little bit good texturing comparatively to like a steel frame that's not milled out or anything like that. The only problem is it can eventually dry rot off or exposed to elements. It can eventually get damaged to where it could get maybe cut off or eventually it could get rub off.
And the cool thing about the cord here is you can basically do it to any knife. So for example, this soft P, where it doesn't basically have a handle, it's just steel handle, wrap it with cord if you want. Cheap, but effective. Alright, thanks guys. So again, this is our 4th video in our 5-part series. Keep in mind there were some materials that we didn't cover because there are so many things out there on the market. You can get bones, like I said, for the natural part. You can also get some really high-speed steel, some stuff that, it's going to be really expensive as well. But thanks again for tuning in. We covered pretty much what you're going to find on the market, broadly speaking, for knife and handle materials. Thanks again. Tune in for our 5th part where we cover action types. So locks, how to engage the knife, etc. Thanks again, and this is Quentin
And Dylan
from Openrange Shooting Sports.